This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you for joining the City of Kingston's Common Council at our Laws and Rules meeting. Today is Wednesday, April 15th. My name is Andrea Schott, the Council President and organizer for our virtual meetings. Before we begin our meeting, we would like to go over a few meeting guidelines to help us navigate this system as efficiently and respectfully as possible. We ask that members of the public and press remain muted and off camera for the length of the meeting. As organizer, I reserve the right to mute anyone who unmutes themselves. Council members and city staff will control their own mute buttons. Good practice would be to mute yourself if you are not speaking to avoid background noise and feedback. If a council member or staff wishes to speak, they will raise their hands. Their chairperson will call on them before they speak by stating their name clearly for our audio listeners. All of our meetings are recorded. Both video and written transcriptions will be made available to the public on the city's website at a later date. Although we will not have public speaking tonight, you could submit written comments to the City of Kingston Clerk, Elisa Tinty, at emtinty@kingston-ny.gov, or by dropping them off at the drop box located outside the side door of City Hall. We also encourage you to reach out to committee chairs or your ward's representative at any time. If you have any audio issues, send a text message to the following number, 845-594-6120. I'll repeat this number again in a second, but be aware that phone calls will not be answered during the meeting. The number to text is 845-594-6120. As the organizer for today's meeting, I reserve the right to lock and pause the meeting to eject anyone who has behaved inappropriately. At tonight's meeting, we have in attendance Chair Alderman Ventura Morel, Ward 1, committee members Patrick O'Reilly, Ward 7, Rita Worthington, Ward 4, Rennie Scott Childress, Ward 3, Don Tollerman, Ward 5, non-voting council members Doug Coop, Ward 2, Michelle Hirsch, Ward 9, and looking through, I think that's all. City staff, we have Elisa Tinty, City Clerk, Mayor Noble, Corp Counsel Dan Gardenstein, Grants Director Kristen Wilson, and that's all. Sorry, it's a big long list of people on here. Before we begin, as a joint effort with community members and churches throughout the city, the committee will pause at 7 p.m. We welcome you to join us at this time to clap, cheer, ring your bell, anything to make some noise to recognize and show support for our fearless healthcare workers who are dedicating so much of themselves in our time of need. Thank you for your patience during these difficult times, and on behalf of the Common Council, I wish you and your family good health. And I now turn the floor over to Chairman Ventura Morel.
Good evening, everyone. It is 6:35, and I would like to call this meeting to order. Before we start, I also want to point out that Alderman Anthony Davis is also with us, Ward 6.
My apologies, Tony.
Okay, so I'm going to shuffle the agenda around a little bit. I know we have city staff and consultants, and I think the mayor will join the meeting, and I don't want to take too much of their time having to wait until the end of the meeting. So I will start with the old business first, and the first item we will address is the Kingston Points Rail Trail Phase 2 seeker. And I will give the floor now to Kristen Wilson and the consultants.
Hi.
I'm sorry, before we start, can you say what page that is in the packet?
Sure. That is page 31 on the packet.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for the reminder. Okay, Kristen.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't expect to be first on the agenda, so I was in the middle of making dinner.
Oh.
So I'm just moving to my to the information online.
Okay. Yeah, I knew you had the consultants joining us, and I didn't want them to have to sit through the whole meeting.
Yeah, okay, so let me just pull up the communication. So essentially the communication that I sent in, and I'll turn on my camera. Great. So the communication that I sent in was to ask the council to begin the seeker process for the Kingston Point Rail Trail Phase 2. This is a project that would continue the Kingston Green Line and the Kingston Point Rail Trail from the current ending point at the Roundout Gardens. Excuse me. Allegra, I can't, you gotta go downstairs. I'm very sorry. Okay, I'll come down in a minute. Okay? I feel like the guy, the news reporter who had this child come in the middle of the briefing. Anyway, so this is for a seeker process for the rail trail from Roundout Gardens, where it currently ends, to the Trolley Museum, and essentially ending on East Strand Street. Let's see. So the communication that I put in was to begin the seeker process. I do want to note that in the communication I put in, there were a couple of mistakes. In the second paragraph, I had said that we were awarded a grant in the amount of $200,000, and it says that there's a required match of $250,000. That is not accurate. It's actually, the required match is $50,000. So I just wanted to note that. The project cost is estimated at this point to be 1.5 million. In the communication, I said nearly 1 million. We do have funds for this project in another grant that is in the amount of about 200,000. So right now we have about 400,000 for the project. And the $50,000 match. The other grant is, the match has already been met by the work that we did on phase 1. So we had planned to seek additional funding for this project through the CFA process this year. Obviously, I don't know how that's all going to go with the current state of things. But regardless of whether we have funding for the project or not, we still can continue with the design and the seeker process. We've requested that this action be determined as an unlisted action. And when you determine the seeker as an unlisted action, you don't necessarily need to coordinate a review, but we thought we would just coordinate a review because we have the time, and it would be worthwhile to get other agencies and input from other places. So we have shared the first resolution in the seeker process for consideration. And we also have Tim Moot from CPL, who is our design firm on this project, to share about the design that it's really in a little bit past a preliminary phase. So it's not quite final, but nearly final. And so he'll share about that. And then we also have a short environmental assessment form that you can ask questions about after Tim gives the presentation on the design.
And before Tim gets started, I want to point out for those who are listening that the visuals he'll be presenting are available on the city website under the posted agenda.
So, Andrea, is it possible to give Tim the ability to share his screen? And before he does that, maybe Tim, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I'm Tim Moot, principal with CPL. We're the design firm retained to do the work on this phase 2 of the rail trail. Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. I can, if I'm able to share my screen, I can pull up a couple PDFs and do a quick virtual walkthrough of the highlights of the project, if that would work. I don't know the capabilities here.
Yeah, I haven't done that with this platform. Nobody's asked to do that. I wasn't prepared for that, so I have to research that.
You have an icon that says, you know, I can click it to share my screen, and then it maybe prompt you to say yes. And then if you do, I can pull. You want to try it?
Sure.
Okay, here we go. Let's see. Actually, it's not active.
Our IT guy might have taken this ability all out of our control.
Okay. Well, I think in your packet you will see some graphics. Do people have like a site plan or? Yeah. So that's what Mr. Morel's holding up is that we'll call it PDF number 1. And as Kristen mentioned, basically this is a phase 2 extension of the rail trail. It starts over on Garrigan Drive. It runs approximately 790 feet along the existing rail bed to the trolley museum per se. From the trolley museum, it continues east through the trolley museum rail yard, which you'll probably see more on the PDF number 2. And it traverses about 1,300 feet through the trolley museum rail yard and ends at East Strand. The total length that we're proposing is 2,105 feet, about 0.4 of a mile. Design parameters of the trail, you know, it's a paved surface and it ranges in maximum width to 10 feet and narrows down to some areas within 6 feet. There are some challenges to the design that you'll see on the PDF 2 relative to the area behind the building for the trolley museum. There's some rock outcrops and we call that basically a bottleneck. We've worked with the trolley museum on several layouts and trying to minimize impediments to their operation while also bringing public elements to people on the rail trail side to sort of enjoy the elements of the trolley museum. And so there's a certain stretch that runs behind the trolley museum where we're having to neck down the width of the trail. There'll be several landings to meet grade in order to maintain ADA accessibility all along the trail. These landings are specific to the area behind the rail trail and will probably likely require a dismount. In other words, nobody could ride their bike through this area. We would sort of promote walking only. From there, there's miscellaneous design elements, miscellaneous tree plantings. We're providing for some picnic tables, and we're calling it a trailhead on the east end at the East Strand intersection, where there'll be a couple picnic tables in an area where people can sort of maybe park, have ability to offload bikes. There'll be interpretive signage along the way, rail trail directional signs, as well as some maybe historic signs relative to the operation of the trolley museum. Another component to this is we're working toward a 9/11 memorial exhibit. You'll see on that PDF 2, there's some renderings of where we are now relative to the concept. You know, there's going to be an existing, call it a rail car. That was an MTA car that was impacted by 9/11, as well as the museum, as I believe it's a couple vehicle remnants and an elevator motor from one of the top floors of the tower building. So the intent would be to create maybe a mobile display on a flatbed rail car and hitch this to the existing MTA car and maybe even be able to transport the exhibit off-site per se. I think there's some parade along the riverfront that they do annually. So relative to that display, we're looking at a modern enclosure to just keep those elements out of the weather. That's pretty much it in a nutshell without being able to really walk you through some of the other design details. There's a section, we call it, on the PDF #1, which sort of shows you a graphic of what the trail would represent behind the Trolley Museum. I don't know if anybody has specific questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
So
Alderman Tullerman.
2 questions. One is, where does the trail come down? Does it come down onto Tompkins Street or down to the East Strand? Where does it actually connect down?
It will actually connect onto East Strand before Tompkins. There's a little gravel lot in the back behind it's not directly behind the wastewater treatment plant, but there's a like a brick building adjacent to the wastewater treatment plant. So it's in that general area behind there. There's a road crossing at the rail trail there on East Strand, or on the rails
Yeah,
there.
I see it on the maps. I don't have the PDF, unfortunately, that you're referring to. But the trail that goes behind is that going right along the Trolley Museum? So you're going to have to hold back the bank there?
Yes, and so that's another big design parameter. There's several retaining walls, various heights across the back. We've worked with the Trolley Museum to basically tuck the trail, up against the slope there as much as we can,
Right.
so that we don't impede their yard.
Did you
There will.
look at the option of the trail that's uphill from there? That's, the old, where East Union Street used to continue, or there's a dirt path up there. Did you?
There were some preliminary discussions. However, one of the design elements that we have to maintain is ADA accessibility. And so while we looked at that as, an intriguing option, there's no way really to make that ADA compatible to get up there. Once you were up there, it has some possibilities. But even on the Tompkins side, once you came down, that's a very steep slope.
And one last question. When this is completed, would it be part of the Empire State Trail?
I believe it will, Christian. That was one of the things we were working. I don't know if it's Empire State or Greenway, or Kristen.
Yes, it's both. Well, the Kingston Green Line and the Empire State Trail.
Will be one.
Yeah, it's Kingston Point Rail Trail, Kingston Green Line, and Empire State Trail. So it's on all 3 of those systems. It's one and the same.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Anyone else on the question?
Yes,
Yes.
Alderman Shabbat has.
Yeah, actually, this is for Kristen. Is any part of the payback can in-kind services be used?
I'm not sure about the RTP grant, the $200,000 that has a $50,000 match. I'm not sure about that. Possibly. It's although for the other grant that we've already met the match for, we can use in-kind services, but this one is a federal grant, and usually they don't allow, or it's very difficult to record everything that we need to record for in-kind services. So that would be more likely a cash match.
Okay.
Alderman Davis had a question.
Yes, Tim. This is Alderman Tony Davis, but Tim, in regard to right behind the Hudson Valley Landing, I know I've walked that several times before this trail got finalized, and that comes right up behind people's apartments. I can't see the designs. Is it going to be like fencing or something that's going to, the people that are living in those apartments are going to have some privacy?
Yeah, so if you get a chance, look at the PDF number 1, and that's the approach along that area. And we do call out for privacy fencing along there. Because you would be literally at the elevation of the rail trail, you would be looking right into, I think it's the 2nd story windows of those apartments.
All right, thank you.
Alderman Tellerman?
Is there provision for parking for visitors?
So we're looking at the trailhead on the East Strand side. There's a vacant lot owned by the city. It's a gravel lot right now, and that would allow for some parking there. I mean, there's still coordination that needs to happen. And also, the city does own the lot directly in front of the trolley museum. So really, the only questionable area would be on the Garrigan side, because you really would be on the apartment complex side for parking there.
Are you reviewing that as part of your scope?
Well, we've reviewed it relative to the other ends, but we're looking at this as sort of a continuation of phase 1 at Garrigan. So it's not really a focal point for parking access. It's just a continuation point. So in our opinion, we're providing parking is available at the trolley museum and on the opposite end where the trail would end.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, then I will read the resolution I have here. It says, resolution of the City of Kingston Common Council determining the Kingston Point Rail Trail Phase 2 project as an unlisted action in the State Environmental Quality Review Act seeker process pursuant to 6 NYCRR Part 617 and directing the Office of Grants Management to coordinate the review of the action. Do I have a motion? Alderman Scott Childress, do I have a second? Alderwoman Worthington, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, anybody opposed? Okay, thank you, Kristen, and sorry, I forgot your name, but thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry for the disruption at the beginning, but thank you for making us first and making this meeting much shorter than I thought it would be. So thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Scott Childress had something to say?
Yes, I just want to remind folks or let folks know who weren't at our last meeting or two that we developed some hand signals for voting yes, thumbs up, voting no, thumbs down, making a motion, 1 finger, seconding a motion, 2 fingers.
Thank you.
And I'm just going to piggyback on that because there's a lot of folks on here and you're all, the committee members are separated. If you could just keep them up so I could help Jeffrey see them too, because he's not seeing everybody. And Patrick, we still can't see you. So you'll just have to make your vote vocal or yeah, if you can make your vote vocal.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so do we have the mayor online?
Yes, Jeffrey, I'm here.
Oh, you are. Okay, so the next item on the agenda that we are going to address is the mayor's proposal for Parks and Recreation and Public Works. If you could speak on that and refresh everybody's mind of what has gone on. Yes, Alderwoman at large. President Schott, please.
Because I've recused myself from this topic, although I am also the organizer, I cannot leave the meeting. So I just want it on the record that I'm muting myself. I'm not taking place, but I'm just keeping track of the callers and I can't actually leave. So I'm just muting myself right now.
Thank you. Okay, Mayor Noel.
Sure. So I think kind of refreshing back to, I think the last time we met together about this topic was in February. At that time, I proposed to be able to change a part of the city charter by local law to be able to have the superintendent and that in the charter, it's called the Director of Recreation, to be able to have the Parks and Recreation Department supervised by the Department of Public Works Superintendent. That change would allow there to be one central leadership of the two departments, while there would still be two separate departments per se, per the charter. It would be all under one superintendent. We haven't had any action on that quite yet by the council. And so when our former Director of Recreation retired a few weeks ago, I appointed Lindsay Timbrook to be the Director of Recreation per the charter, off of an eligible civil service list. And also per the charter, I assigned parks maintenance and those related responsibilities to the Department of Public Works, which historically used to do parks maintenance. And again, that's why it's in the charter. And so we gave those duties back to Public Works, and that's been in place for the last 2 weeks, and has been working out extremely well so far. Everybody is happy, and it's we're getting our parks maintained, and it's there's been really good communication between DPW and the Parks and Rec maintenance staff. And so this evening, I believe also since then, I did send out to all of the aldermen, half a dozen or so communities that have this shared DPW Parks and Rec, collaboration where the Department of Public Works is the overall, kind of head department. And then within the Department of Public Works, there are multiple different divisions or departments. And so I shared a bunch of those with folks. I hope that you had a chance to kind of review some of those cities and towns, and to kind of get a sense of, what we were thinking here. And I will just say, and I'll end now, is that, based on my experience, with almost 20 years at Parks and Recreation, and then, as the last 4 years as mayor, I think that this makes sense for the city and is what I would recommend. But I definitely recognize that this is completely in the hands of the council. And so obviously it's your decision. And so I just wanted to, I can answer any more specific questions, but it really just is, it has to be a decision that the council makes. And, I think at this point, I don't really have anything else to add.
Thank you, Mayor. Before we move on with this agenda item, I want to point out that it's 7 o'clock. We said we were going to clap to honor the healthcare workers in our city. So if you want everybody else to hear you clap, you can unmute yourself and we'll clap for about a minute or so. Thank you, everyone. That wasn't quite a minute, but I didn't realize how long a minute of clapping would be. So thank you, everyone. So back to our scheduled meeting. So anybody on the question? Alderman Tallerman.
Steve, I have a question about who's overseeing the programming, because if Lindsay's the director, but will there be a program person?
Sure. So the way the current Parks and Recreation Department is set up is that within the department, there are 2 other recreation leaders, an environmental educator, as well as a environmental education and sustainability coordinator that all are within, kind of the programmatic area, in addition to the director of recreation position that Lindsay is in. And so obviously right now, there's really almost no programming happening, but that would be the team that would run and manage, all of the programs, as part of the.
So Lindsay would do the sports, the teams, the volleyball and all that?
Yes, that's all within her purview, is to basically manage all of the programs, the summer staff, the summer camps, the pool and the beach staffing, making sure that we have lifeguards and all of those things. And then, public works, and, would be responsible for all of the maintenance of those facilities and the, the capital planning and management of, the major projects that we're working on. Obviously in coordination currently, with recreation, obviously if it was one together unit, it kind of would even further break down the silo, I think. But right now, that's currently that's the setup as we speak today.
So if there were a demand for like senior programming that she may not have experience with, how would she get guidance, or how would that happen?
Again, I think that, with our staff, if there's a demand for senior programs, they would have to figure that out. And, they all have, experience in recreation. And, currently our recreation staff have led, recreation programs for seniors and other things. And so there's lots of conferences and, trainings that our staff go to on an annual basis. But if a demand is created, they work really hard to fill that demand. And if we can't do it, if it's out of the scope of the city, we reach out to our nonprofit partners, to collaborate with them.
Okay. Alderman Scott Childress had a question.
Yes, thank you for being here, Mayor. We appreciate your coming out virtually, as it were. So one thing I'm wondering is, I see a potential problem, because right now, if a park requires maintenance, the Parks and Rec director can simply send out a crew to take care of that. So what authority will the rec director have to require the Department of Public Works to do any parks maintenance? How do you ensure that those two entities work together?
I think to ensure that, I think we need to change the charter. I think that right now the charter has, the parks maintenance responsibility underneath that of DPW, and the charter has the recreation responsibilities under the director of recreation. We've always had cordial relationships between the two departments, and so it's been able to work effectively, over the length of the department. But I do think that that is what I think we've identified, and I think that that's, we were looking to make that change here to help clarify that going forward for the future. But I think we've relied on good communication and management between the two departments forever. And as of in the most recent history, like under the tenure of the last director, there was much more involvement with parks maintenance, but the department at the time had a parks administrator who really managed the parks maintenance aspects of the department. When that position was removed from Parks and Recreation and brought to DPW, a lot of the management of the recreation or of the maintenance fell on the director. But really what it did was it created the need for us to have a really well positioned and well paid foreman of our maintenance staff. And so we ended up we changed the position grade and title to reflect that. And so we now pay our maintenance foreman at a level that is quite high. And this person we ended up getting who used to be the facilities director at SUNY Ulster. And so that has really helped us also be able to better coordinate. And now that person reports to DPW, and it's really been relatively seamless so far over the last 2 weeks in terms of communication between the director of recreation and DPW so far.
So what I hear you saying is it's dependent on personalities, that there's no actual process or procedure that would allow the recreation director to make things happen.
Correct.
Okay. Now, I'm also having a little trouble figuring out where exactly does the rec director fit? If we had a a flow chart, mayor would be at the top of the administration. Below there on one line, you'd have the DPW superintendent. Is this rec director on the same line as the superintendent of DPW, or underneath some other superintendent or supervisor?
So are you speaking right now, or what would happen if the council merged the two departments?
I'm talking about right now, and then of course, if you merge the two departments, I think that raises some other issues, but yes.
So right now, the director of recreation per the charter reports directly to me. So Lindsay
Okay.
Chimbrook is a management confidential employee who reports to me.
All right.
Per the charter.
Now, and so then also in this time period right now, who's going to be working to look after the Dietz Stadium renovation? We need somebody with a lot of experience there, somebody who's got, a real deep understanding of the history of Dietz Stadium. What do you foresee in terms of managing that process of renovation?
Well, currently, because there was not capacity at Parks and Recreation, the superintendent wasn't able to manage that project. And so Ruth Ann, who works for Kristen Wilson, is currently managing that project with that gentleman, Tim Moot, who you just saw earlier. They are the current project management team of the Dietz Stadium project. But going forward, right now, DPW in coordination with Parks and Recreation, are going to be, managing all of those capital projects going forward with, the appropriate staff.
So would there be a director of Dietz Stadium after the renovations are done? Somebody who could take care of all the different requirements there?
No, as of now, there's not any position in the budget specifically related to Dietz Stadium other than Lindsay.
Okay, thank you.
Lindsay would be responsible for all of the management of the schedules, working with the school district, sponsorships for the stadium. But then other staff would be responsible for the capital management and improvements of the stadium.
All right, thank you.
City Grants Manager Kristen Wilson had something to say.
I was just going to add to what Steve said. I wanted to note that Tim Moot, who was just on the call with us, has a long experience. His son went to Kingston High School and has a lot of experience with the history of Dietz Stadium. And we have a number of different grants that are part of the Dietz Stadium project. So someone in the engineering department will be managing the parking lot project, and we have a project advisory committee that's made up of many different local stakeholders who know about the history of Dietz. And so it's really a shared management and shared design experience.
Thank you. Anyone else on the question? Alderwoman Worthington and then Alderman Davis.
Hi, Mayor Noble. Thanks for being here. So I'm not sure if I heard you answer Rennie's question as far as the flow chart is concerned. You said that right now Lindsay reports to you, but should the two departments merge, then that chart would obviously change. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then she would then report to the superintendent of public works. Is that how that works?
That's how that would work right now if it was to say happen tomorrow. Yep.
Okay. Okay.
Alderman Davis.
Yes, Steve, couple questions. So, or maybe Kirsten, Tim Moot, are we are paying him to be on our project team or our advisor for this Dietz Stadium and renovation? Is that part of his contract?
Yes.
Go ahead, Kristen.
You want me to go?
You go ahead. Yeah, you go.
Okay. So CPL was procured through an RFP process. and is being paid for by DRI grant funds to work on the pool and the stadium project, or the architectural aspects of the project. We got other grant funding for the parking lot design and the green infrastructure of the parking lot. And we will be issuing an RFP for a consultant for that project. And all of the consultants and project managers at the city will be part of one project advisory committee that has already been created.
And that's already been created. So they are up to date on what's going on with Date Stadium and what needs to be done, et cetera, and what the grant's all about. Do they,
Yeah,
what I'm trying to say, do they need to be brought up to speed? As everybody who's on board knows, has been on board since the, inception of this funding that we received?
Yes, the project advisory committee is made up of, we have members of the school district, of the uptown community, of different like a running organization and health organizations and the soccer organizations. So a lot of the people who utilize the stadium are part of that, as well as city staff, and including Lindsay and Julie, and I think some other DPW members, as well as engineering staff. So there's a lot of voices and perspectives that are part of that design process.
So so those are the people on the Park Advisory Committee?
Yeah, it's called a project advisory committee. And I don't have the list of all the members right at my fingertips right now. But we can get that list for you if that's desired.
Yes,
I have a
like
question.
I just have one more question.
Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
So, Steve, I got this right. You said if it was to be changed, the director of rec, which is Lindsay, park maintenance, which is Steve Frere, would report to DPW superintendent, which is currently Ed Norman, who then reports to you.
Yes.
Now, one last question. Who does Steve Frere right now get his direction from? I've heard a lot of good stuff is going on right now at parks. They're out, they're painting the door at Midtown. They're out doing projects, getting stuff and prepared, hoping that we get these parks open up. But who does the parks maintenance report to right now? Who do they get their direction from in the morning time about what is to be done?
Ryan Kuhn, the deputy superintendent at DPW.
Is the one that gives Steve or the park people their work orders for today.
Yes.
Kuhn?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, and Alderman O'Reilly had something to say.
Yes, I have a question for Steve. This is Patrick O'Reilly. Hi, Steve. Steve, what qualifications does Ed have to run the rec department? I mean, we know he's a capable man. He's run the DPW better than I've seen anybody run it. But I'm just wondering, what is his qualifications to run a recreation department?
So just to be clear, so with the charter, as the charter lays out, it is really clear relatively to the section on DPW and what their responsibilities are. And so when I did our job search and I reviewed applications, I had the opportunity to look at what the charter said that DPW is responsible for, and what previous work had happened, as well as when I was looking then at my applicants to see who had the background and experience in management that could effectively lead a department. I mean, DPW is effectively a multi-million-dollar agency, and I don't think anyone at DPW would say that they are solely responsible for every part of the operation. I think that it has always been and continues to be a team effort, with many different people being responsible for many different aspects. And, you know, there always needs to be somebody at the top that, you know, can help make the decisions and be able to mostly be the person that communicates effectively with me about what's going on and what the needs of the department are. And I think to be an effective manager, that's the most important thing. You don't actually need to know your subject material all that well, because there are lots of other people that know our sewers a whole lot better and know our streets a whole lot better because they've worked for the city for 25+ years. However, to be an effective manager, you need to be able to figure out how to, you know, get your workforce to, you know, do the job and to kind of be able to then respond back to all of us and all of you as to what's happening. And so that's why I do think that, you know, with all of our department heads, they need to be able to effectively manage and communicate with us. And they may not have knowledge about every single little thing, but I think that that's the case for all of us, is that, you know, we really need people that are able to be, you know, people that can get things done, regardless of how well they know the subject material. And if they don't know it well, the best managers will actually learn it and know for next time. So that's really what we're looking for. And that's why I do think that, you know, if we were to combine into one department, at no point would I expect the superintendent to need to know everything about everything that happens at, you know, rec or in parks or, you know, and any other, you know, combination like that. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Patrick.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. It's Patrick O'Reilly again. Steve, let's say we get a new superintendent at some point down the road. The superintendent would have to now be responsible for the DPW and the rec department. That's going to be a tough job to fill, don't you think?
You know, I think that it would actually, you know, make our applicant pool, you know, bigger, because I think that there are people that are in, you know, the superintendent level positions that really we want to be good managers. I think that if you look at the types of managers that DPW, their Department of Public Works, has hired for their buildings and grounds department, which also manages their parkland and park programs, you know, they're really just really good administrators. And that's really, eventually, as our department grows and as our city gets bigger, you know, that is really the crucial. We need people that are really good at knowing how to manage their budget, how to manage their staff, and being able to, again, have knowledge of how to get the actual infrastructure work done. And I'd love to be able to get to that place. Right now, we've needed people like our current superintendent who actually knows, you know, how to fix things, because we have years and years and years of backlog. And so, like, I still need someone that knows how to plow. But eventually I would love to be able to get to a place where we're able to actually hire administrators because they're really good administrators. And I think that, you know, should be any municipality's goal in the long term.
I just have a question. It was my understanding that Julie Noble had taken over the capital projects for the Parks Department. So from what I understand, what Kristen just said, she's not managing the Deet Stadium parking project.
Yeah, and so I'm not sure, Jeffrey, who you talked to, but it wasn't me. So I'm not sure where you got your information, but you know, we have a lot of project managers in the city, and I think one of the things that's really important is that you know, we try to put you know, our project managers on projects that you know, they'll excel at. So for instance, with Deet Stadium and the Green Infrastructure Grant, we have you know, staff in the engineering department that manage our other green infrastructure grants. And so it makes sense to have people managing the same types of projects with the same funding agencies, because they know all the intricacies of those programs. But yeah, you know, in particular, you know, Julie manages a ton of projects, and I think you guys all know that already by her coming to visit you. And so every project that she manages, most of them are in the Parks Department realm or the DPW realm, because that's where all of our, major capital, projects are fallen. And that's what she's done for a long time. And, she'll continue to do for the department.
Okay. So I just have, I've been against this merger idea from the beginning. I think now that we have new management and Lindsay has been in the position for just about a week, I think we should see how that works out. We should give her a chance to excel before we take it from under her. I think the merger, I think we could go with this, which is what I had proposed to you back when we met in February. Why not do an interim director for now and see how that works out before we go ahead and restructure, and then we can address this through charter change. But having said that, unless somebody else has a question, or Alderman Scott Childress.
Yes, Steve, so I'm wondering, have you gotten input on this idea of complete merger from the Parks and Rec Commission?
I went to a commission meeting that I think Mr. Alderman Shabbat also attended back in February, and discussed the proposal with the commission. And there were a couple of questions asked, mostly in particular related to whether or not we were going to have our Parks and Recreation maintenance staff like on the back of Packers, like picking up trash and things like that. And I assured them that that wasn't the case. But I didn't have any other questions that night, and I haven't had any questions from any commission members since then about this. But they didn't state anything one way or the other, and haven't since.
So you don't have an actual report or an actual statement from them about their position on this? You had a meeting with them, but nothing of any great detail?
Correct.
Okay. Now, I also, one other question. You said that things seem to be working out really well right now and that everybody's happy with the changes. And I'm wondering what kind of, that's a report, but do we have actual commentary from people who are involved? Is there a way of quantifying these changes and how people are responding? Is there a way of us really getting a feel that the folks who are involved in the change really feel this way?
I think that there are two different ways. One is you could ask them and not just take my word for it, But the second way is that you can also wait to see how long it takes and if you get any complaints from your constituents. I think every single one of you probably at some point called me to complain about something that Parks didn't do in the past. And so I think I'd like to see whether it gets better or not under the new leadership at DPW. I believe that they're going to have access to more resources and better on the ground in the field supervision. And so I think that you should get less complaints. Obviously, I think that we will see how the spring goes, and obviously we're in a difficult time now, but when things start to get going again, I think that that will be kind of the test of how well this works. But again, I just have to say that this isn't just an experiment. I'm currently following the charter as it states in the city code, and so I'm not just playing around trying things out. This is specifically what is supposed to be done per the charter that we're all supposed to be following.
Alderman Shabbat.
Thanks, Jeffrey. I'm sure it comes as no surprise that I'm not in favor of restructuring the department. I know these are just going to come down to matters of opinion. I have discussed this. Is certainly not the first time, Steve. I've discussed it with other mayors before you. It's been proposed before. I have a very long history with the rec department, so, some of it may sound, kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm speaking with my heart here, but I've been a volunteer for almost 50 years there, spent almost 20 on the rec commission, longtime chair. I spent a lot of time with several directors. I'm really not aware. It seems that it has been a process that has worked pretty well. Being on the commission, I've really never heard of any problems that have gone on between DPW and the rec department. It seems like, they have a very good relationship, which, leads me to believe, why would we want to change that? It seems to be working pretty good to me. The rec department has, been a separate entity for as long as I can remember, whenever the 50s, probably longer than I've been around. And I really think the laborers there should be dedicated to the rec department, have the rec department make decisions. As you said before, we rely on people's expertise. And it's no, excuse me, no slight to Ed, but as you said, it is not Ed's expertise. It's the rec department's expertise, where people should go during the day. I would like to see that continue. And, this is certainly no reflection on anybody's ability to perform. I mean, I'm very confident in Ed Norman's abilities at DPW. It's just, I really feel that, it's not something I agree with. I'll leave it at that.
Anyone else on the question? Alderman Davis?
Alderman Davis here. And so as the mayor has just indicated, Steve, and you sit on the rec committee, and why wasn't any discontent or not in favor of this brought up at the commission meetings, if that was correct? If the mayor just said that he went to a meeting and no one really on the commission disagreed with this, and I mean, that is what he's saying. I'd like to hear you, and you were at that committee meeting. Was there any, in disfavor of doing this that was brought up at that time?
Is this posed to me, Tony?
To you, yes, Steve.
Or the other yes. Steve?
Nope, okay. To you.
All right, just want to make sure we're clear what Steve is answering here. Yeah, I was at that meeting, but to be honest, it was brand new. It was good of Steve to come and kind of fill everybody in, because nobody really knew what was going on. I think it kind of took everybody a little aback, and I don't think anybody really had time to pose, if there were any questions. I don't even remember if there were any questions whatsoever. I mean, since then, I've talked to numerous people. I don't get the impression that, it's certainly not a unanimous in favor from the rec commission, but again, I'm not going to speak for anybody. I would have expected the rec commission to, come up with some kind of an opinion on it, for or against. That's, I'm not trying to sway anybody, or not them anyway. But, I think they should have an opinion as a body, and, I would like to see them come forward, with an opinion on this matter. Again, I think, they were kind of taken off guard, the night Steve was there. We were doing awards, and I think that was the night, right? Yeah. Were we doing awards, Mayor? Yeah. So, I don't think anybody was, it wasn't a dedicated meeting, shall I say.
So have you had a meeting since then, Steve Shabbat?
No, we haven't had any meetings. No, the last one was called off.
All right. Thank you.
I just want to point out that the council received a letter today from Ron Woods stating that he is against the merger. And Ron Woods is the longtime member of the Rec Commission and who recently retired. Anybody else on the question? Okay, then I will ask Tony.
Just one other thing to clarify. And so the D Stadium staff, Steve Shabbat or Steve Mayor Noble, and the D Stadium maintenance, the two gentlemen up there, and do they report? They report to the parks maintenance foreman as well, correct?
Yes, Steve Rear. They have been and will continue to report to him.
And I wanted to say a great job to that maintenance staff, whoever, and D Stadium looking a little bit better with those bushes torn up out of there that have been there since as long as I've known, and that were just going wild. And I was up there just 2 days ago and was amazed that you can actually see inside there from some parts. So thank you. That is what I'm talking about. People noticing that things are getting done in regard to this, the parks maintenance, and getting out there. Again, that's been a long eyesore for a long time, going up to D Stadium, those weeds there, whatever those hedges are that were never maintained, and now they're gone. So that's good. That's good progress. Thank you.
Okay, I will entertain a motion now. Is there a motion?
What are you motioning on, Jeffrey? What is the
motion?
Not that I'm a voting member, man.
Yes, I will entertain a motion to approve the mayor's proposed Parks and Rec and Public Works Department's collaboration.
I'm not making a motion. I don't, in my packet here, I don't have a committee report or anything like that. So I'm wondering what is it we're acting on here?
It was on our agenda. I should have asked for it to be resent. It was on our agenda on the February meeting, which was the last time we met.
Oh.
The mayor's proposed merger of the two departments. He had asked at the time for the creation of the new position to be taken off consideration and just move forward with the merger of the two departments.
Okay.
Which would be a local law to change the wording of the charter, to change the wording from the director of, or the Parks and Recreation Department would be supervised by the superintendent of public works. That's the sentence that I was proposing that needed to be inserted, and that would be the change. And so that would be the request.
Okay. So I will. Sorry. Could you repeat that? To change the charter?
Yeah. So to be able to replace in the charter where it says the Parks and Recreation Department shall be supervised by. Currently, it says Director of Recreation / Parks Administrator. That would be replaced by the Parks and Recreation Department would be supervised by the Superintendent of Public Works.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion to change the charter to replace the language where it states that Park and Recreation should be supervised by a Director of Parks and Rec and replace that with the Parks and Rec Department to be supervised by the Superintendent of DPW. Is there a motion? Alderwoman Shaw. Oh.
Patrick wants to speak.
Oh, Patrick? Yes, on the question, Patrick.
Steve, can I just ask you, obviously the workload for Ed has doubled or maybe whatever, it gotten larger, his workload. Are you planning on in the future paying him any more money for the job? And will you pay other, how does that going to work with other department heads too, according to union contracts and things like that?
As of now, with the combined addition of the 7 or 8 maintenance staff, as it stands right now, Ed's workload is, slightly greater. Ryan Kuhn's workload is slightly greater. But really what they've been doing is, as you've seen, is they went literally park by park with our maintenance supervisor to look at all of the things that should have been taken care of at some point and are now getting taken care of basically in the last 2 weeks. You've noticed some pretty big changes happening already. But I think if this was to kind of merge, the department would grow even more. But I think that even the current salary of the superintendent of public works is equivalent, is actually only about $6,000 to $7,000 less than the police chief, who actually would manage about the same amount of employees. But the police chief has to have a whole lot of specialized training and things. And so the salary is relatively equivalent as of now, even with the addition of if the two departments were to combine, the salary is still kind of in the ballpark, if you will.
Okay, anyone else? Alderman Davis and then Alderwoman Worthington.
Again, I apologize for this. So right now, the way this department stands is that the rec and maintenance is the rec director and the maintenance are on one side, and then DPW is on the other side. That is what you're voting on, to merge the rec with DPW. If not, it would be as it was a week ago, I guess, with the rec and parks and maintenance on one side and DPW on the other side.
No, right now, as of when Lindsay took over on April 6th, I named her the director of recreation. She has the specific job duties related to a recreation director. And at that time, I followed the charter and I placed parks maintenance under DPW.
Correct.
That will stay that way unless there is a vote on the council in a positive fashion to join the two departments, or to have both departments be supervised by the same superintendent. Not joining the two departments together. There's still going to be two separate departments in the charter, but they will just be both supervised by the same boss. And so that is, that's our request. Again, not joining the two together. The workforces are not going to mingle. Their union rules are not going to change. They have very different union rules and work rules. But yes, there would be, if nothing happens tonight and tomorrow, rec and parks maintenance are going to be two separate departments that both will report separately to me.
I see, to you.
Yeah.
So Steve and Lindsay report directly to you if nothing happens. Right now, Freer, Lindsay reports to you, and rec reports to Kuhn, who reports to Ed, who reports to you.
Correct.
All right. That's a good roadmap.
Alderwoman Worthington.
I yielded. I think I got my question answered.
Okay. Alderman Tellerman.
Just a comment, I think that if they are merged, I think Ed Norman should get more money for the additional responsibility. Just a comment.
Thank you. Okay, I will now entertain a motion to approve the mayor's proposed merger of the two departments and to change the language accordingly on the charter. Alderman Tellerman has motioned. Is there a second? Is there a second? Is there a second? Okay, hearing no second, the motion doesn't carry, so the issue is done. So the next agenda item we had, thank you, Mayor. Again, I think we can see how things go with the new leadership, and hopefully, if in a few months we find that a merger was necessary, we can address it through the charter reform route, which was I think would be a good way to go forward. And again, I haven't publicly done so, so I would like to congratulate Lindsay Timbrook on her appointment as director of REC. Okay, so the next item we have on the agenda is the police accountability proposed legislation. We've been meeting as at the policing subcommittee. Alderwoman Worthington, Alderman Scott Childress, and we've had some very fruitful conversations there, and we've received some great communications. One came today that was Alderwoman Worthington would speak on, but I thought it was beautiful how the community is now beginning or continuing to be engaged in this subject. So I will yield the floor to Alderwoman Worthington. You're still mute, Rita.
Okay, I'm off. So Rita Worthington here. You know, with this police accountability, first I just want to say thank you to Rennie Scott Childress and our chair tonight, Jeffrey, you know, for helping us go and, you know, move along with this accountability. And as Alderwoman of a ward where this issue remains a topic of discussion, you know, I just want to make sure that things are done correctly. And that being said, you know, I certainly believe there needs to be police accountability and transparency. You know, this is why we pushed forward the training for the implicit training for the police commission. You know, I received, you know, numerous emails and communications, and people have spoken to me verbally about this topic in and around the city of Kingston. You know, however, the one letter that really touched me and moved me was a letter that I received today and was able to review, wherein this family was directly affected by what they believe misconduct on the part of our law enforcement, our local police officers. And so while she said that, and while she stated that, she also came to acknowledge that, you know, we all live in this city together. We're going to have to learn how to communicate with one another, and we're going to have to learn how to get along with one another and speak on these hard topics and discuss these topics that are hard to talk about. And so, you know, while she talked about the animosity she felt toward the local police, she also acknowledged that, you know, when everything is said and done, we have to come together. And so toward that end, you know, I feel like we are going to have to come to some kind of consensus or come to some kind of common ground where all parties that are affected by this legislation and by, you know, police accountability and transparency, where all parties can take a part in this discussion. And let me be clear, I understand that, you know, this is part of a larger discussion. You know, it's a hard topic, but we do need to have everyone that is affected by this and everyone that has, you know, comments. We want to hear all sides. And so towards that end, I know that a resolution was submitted to the Laws and Rules Committee to discuss it and pass. You know, toward that end, I'd like to table this resolution and maybe go back to the table. From the onset, I said that I wanted to get involved some of our officers, the police, some of our commission members, some maybe even the union members, and come together and discuss this. So I'm I'm requesting that the resolution not go forward tonight and that we still talk about this.
Okay, so anybody else on the question? Or Alderman Scott Childress?
Yes, I would like to thank Alderwoman Worthington for her leadership on this issue, for her deep work involved in it. And I, too, have been saying from the very beginning that we want to involve a much larger group of folks in this conversation. And so I look forward to thinking about a really helpful means of discussing these issues, because the issue before us tonight was largely procedural. There's bigger things about how we as a community relate to one another and how we think about how we order our society. And I think that this is a great spot. Once we come out of the current crisis, this is a great topic for us to develop a deep and meaningful conversation across lots of different lines to go forward in terms of thinking about really good and tight community relations. Thank you.
I agree. I think this is a much larger subject, and I think this is a good starting point. But what this has pointed out, and especially the communication we received today, is that more input is still needed. So I'm looking forward to working with the community and to continue to move forward with this issue. So I want to thank especially Alderwoman Worthington for her leadership on this subject, and I look forward to continuing to work with you all on this. Okay, so and just to clarify, we are not we are not tabling the issue. We are just holding on it, because tabling would mean that we would be obligated to move on it one way or another within 3 months, and I don't think we should set a timeline to this. Am I correct? Yes, Alderwoman Worthington.
So I just, in our packet, we received the resolution to go forth with. A lot of the resolution has to do with the police commission. So what I'm requesting is that this resolution not go forward at all.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. So we are moving forward now. The next item I have on the agenda is the Charter Commission. We had on the agenda for a while. Alderwoman, back when she was Alderwoman Schott, before she was President Schott, brought it to us as something that we should consider. A few months on February 28th, I believe. We also got a communication from her asking to bring back this subject, and as the mayor mentioned at our last Laws and Rules meeting, which was February, and as illustrated today with the police commission and with the DPW, that there is a need and a place for a conversation about charter reform to happen. So I don't think we are moving with this today. We're just bringing the subject up so that it will eventually come up. Alderman Scott Childress, and then President Schott.
Sorry, wrong hand.
Okay. Oh, so yes.
So this is Andrea Schott. I just wanted to follow up a little bit on, since the last February meeting when we put this on the agenda. I did ask Chairman Ventura Morel if he was okay with me reaching out with the Department of State just to figure out the procedure of starting a charter commission. I did do that after the last Laws and Rules meeting. And we played phone tag a couple of times, and then of course with the pandemic, we kind of lost track a little bit of each other. So as important as I believe this is, and like Chairman Ventura Morel has mentioned, there's already been a couple of things that we are talking about today that charter reform could be helpful in. I'm respectfully asking the committee to just hold on for another month and hopefully get more information as the pandemic kind of calms down and we can get the correct and accurate information from the Department of State on the best way to move forward with this. So thank you.
Anyone else on the question? Okay, then we move forward with our agenda. The mayor was also here. I don't want to keep him on much longer. I know I said we were going to go with old business, but I wanted to bring him back to speak about the affordable housing resolution that he has proposed as a result of a request from the Zoning Board of Appeals. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Jeffrey. So many of you probably have seen in your packet a relatively lengthy opinion of the Zoning Board of Appeals related to the multi-use overlay district and appeal that was filed on behalf of the Kingstonian related to some other property owners uptown. In that decision, it was encouraged, and it was the same encouragement that I publicly talked about last year when many of you attended the press conference at the Kingstonian, where we announced a voluntary 10% affordability requirement that the developers of the Kingstonian were going to voluntarily abide by. I think that the Zoning Board of Appeals really lay out exactly what is wrong with the multi-use overlay district and how we really need to have concrete, mandatory, affordable housing requirements in our code, and we kind of need to do it now. And I just wanted to voice my support for doing it now. I know many of you know that we've been involved in this zoning update project, which again, I look forward to hopefully talking to finance about in the coming weeks. But as a part of that project, we realized that our entire zoning code needs to be updated because it hasn't been done since the 1960s, and that we are going to want to have much more deep discussions about affordable housing and about what kind of changes that we would want to put into our zoning code to more strongly encourage housing and affordable housing to be built, and by making sure that we're providing the right incentives and the right opportunities in the right places to be able to get housing built. We know that that's going to be a long discussion, but I really urge the council to not wait for that discussion. I think that we need to at least put something on the books now, because there are housing projects that are coming now and that are applying to the planning board now. And I think that with some of the legislation that I think that you all have thought about and I think will be proposing, this is really, I think, going to go a long way in making sure that we can start to protect some of these units and get these units created while we work through the zoning issue. So that's really what I wanted to just share, and I can answer any questions, but I think that 10% at this point is achievable. There are really no state incentives to help a private property owner do this. And so we think that 10% is something that they can basically bear the burden of themselves and take it off of their profit margins without really any ill effect or any reduction in the actual interest of people to build housing here. I think if we want to get to a place in the future where we're requiring higher levels, that's where we need to do the density bonuses and other incentives we'll figure out eventually in our code. But I think that this is just a good first start. So answer any questions if anyone has any. And that.
I just want to say that I fully support this initiative. I was very happy when you brought it up last fall, so I'm happy to see it finally coming to us. Alderman Scott Childress.
Oh, I don't have any questions. I was just going to speak to the same issues. So if other people have questions for the mayor, I'm happy to wait.
I don't see any hands. Any other questions for the mayor? Okay, Alderman Scott Childress.
I would like to largely reiterate what the mayor said. I think this is a really important step for us to take. It's a step in the right direction because what it does is it now clarifies that we desire to have affordable housing throughout the city. It's not limited in any particular way by some of our very confusing zoning issues. So the changes to the city code that I sent around that we worked out earlier, these will clarify what affordable housing is, how we understand it, and it will also require at least the 10% development throughout the whole city. Now, the other thing that's really important there is that this is just a step. This is something that we need to do because our current zoning code is extremely confusing, very difficult to navigate and maneuver through. So if we want to have the good kind of development, we want to make sure that we are looking out for our lower income folks. But like I said, this is a first step. And what we want to do is to develop a much more sophisticated, or not sophisticated, but much more just zoning code. We want to be able to create better housing for people up and down the income scale, but particularly looking out for those folks who are lower income, because we don't have anything really that helps to a great extent in the way that this kind of change and the future change we're talking about would encompass.
Okay, so I have two resolutions in front of me. I will read the first one, and then I will call for a motion.
Actually, I'm sorry. Can I explain them before you?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize we were going to go right into that. So the two motions here are procedural. This is not a vote on changing the zoning code. Before we can do that, we have to take several steps. The first one is that we have to declare ourselves as the for seeker purposes as the body of record. We then also have to request if there's any other body that wants to be the body of record. So these are just procedural steps toward having the conversation. They'll also lead to a public hearing. So in no way are we voting on the actual changes to the zoning code tonight.
President Schott?
Yeah, for the public hearing, I mean, if we move forward with this and you vote on this, that triggers a timeline for the public hearing. Is that correct?
Yes, as I understand it.
Alderman O'Reilly?
Steve, you had talked about incentives to bring more housing into Kingston. Could you elaborate on that? How is this going to be an incentive for someone to build housing in Kingston?
Sure. So I think one of the things that we have been finding is that the multi-use overlay district is horribly complicated, terribly written, and for anyone that wants to build basically in and around this district, they have found it really cumbersome and really difficult to understand what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do. And I think that some of the proposed changes that Alderman Scott Childress has worked on will allow us to clarify all of that and allow for at least developers will know what they're getting into when they want to build in Kingston. It really will be much clearer and much more straightforward that regardless of where they build, these are the rules that they're following. And right now, because of the way that the multi-use overlay district has been written, the rules are not clear, and that in itself, I believe, inhibits development.
Thank you. Anybody else on the question? Alderman Scott Childress.
Yeah, I would just like to remind everyone that we are not voting on the changes tonight. This is just opening up the conversation. That's all really that this is doing.
Right. So then I will go ahead and read the first resolution. Be it hereby resolved that the Common Council seeks to be declared lead agency with regard to the review of the annexed proposed changes to the zoning code of the City of Kingston. And be it hereby resolved that this request for lead agency status be circulated to involved agencies as determined pursuant to applicable law. Do I have a motion? Alderman Scott Childress, do I have a second? Alderwoman Worthington, all in favor? Patrick? All opposed?
Get Patrick's vote.
Patrick, what was your vote?
In favor.
Okay, so motion carries. And then the second resolution I have in regard to this is following up on the first one, is be it resolved that a copy of the proposal of the proposed legislation be referred for comment to the City Planning Board, the Ulster County Planning Board, and the Historic Landmarks Preservation Commission. Do I have a motion? Alderwoman Worthington motioned, and Alderman Scott Childress second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? John, you didn't vote? Okay, so that was everybody in favor. Thank you.
Alderman Morel, do you need anything else from me before I hop off the call tonight?
Let me double check. I think, no, that was it. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate all the work everybody's doing. And again, if you need anything or have any constituents that need anything, let me know. But again, thank you all so much. And I hope everybody stays well. Okay.
Before you go, I just want to say thank you for all the work that you're doing in terms of the emergency we're facing. I think it's impressive that the city's been able to put so much work and money to helping folks who are hungry and who are being displaced and dislocated in all kinds of ways. We look forward to working with you very closely as we look at future ways of dealing with the crisis as we see how it shapes.
Great job, Steve.
Thank you all.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so the next item on our agenda is the, the first one we have is a letter from the New York State Historic Preservation on the Kingstonian. This is not an item that requires an action. It was just a letter that was sent to us for information, but if anybody wants to comment on that. No? Okay, then we move on to the next agenda item, which is the zoning map amendment in regards to, what is the number? Sorry, I'm trying to find the address, 51 Strength Drive. And that is the Kingstonian. On the question.
I'm sorry, can you give the page number?
Yes, the page number is 47.
Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Davis.
Can you just remind me, Jeffrey, what do you got in the public? What are you guys voting on right here now? in regard to the
This
Kingstonian?
is the rezoning of the property where the Kingstonian is to be built. The small piece of property where the diner used to be in the parking lot belonging
Thank
to
you.
the
Thank you.
So this is about extending the MUOD.
Yes.
Yes. This is a very small extension, and I think that it's perfectly in line with the development. I think that it streamlines the process for the developer. I don't see any significant reason not to extend that bit of line.
Anyone else on the question? Okay, I just want to say, and this is not a reflection on the project or my thoughts about the project at all. I will be a no vote tonight, only because I feel like I still have outstanding questions. As the mayor explained a few minutes ago, the MUOD definition on the zoning code is extremely confusing, and I still have outstanding questions of why it was drawn the way it was and why it mimics the historic district and what would be the repercussions of extending it. I think since we are speaking about zoning reform, I think that might be, once we have the experts looking at our zoning code, that would probably be a better avenue for this change to happen. But I think I'm alone on that thought.
Well, I have a question.
Yes, Alderwoman Worthington.
So, just so I'm clear, they're asking that that extension that be extended, the MOU. So if we do not move on this, is that going to halt the project or development? What, I think that's my question. That and as far as the zoning, since the mayor alluded to, is not written that well. How does this affect that? What are we doing? Are we just amending a part of the zoning code to allow this, or how does this affect the overall issue of zoning and revamping that?
Alderman Scott Childress.
The issue is not major in terms of thinking about the MUOD and its aim. The aim for that was to direct certain kinds of construction projects and development in that particular district. And by extending this zoning, which again, it kind of defies reason why it doesn't just go right to the edge of the property line there. So, this is going to be something that doesn't have any major effect on the MUOD anywhere else. It simply is going to make it's going to bring all the property under one jurisdiction, so that as the property owner goes forward in thinking about the project, it won't create different kinds of paperwork and other kinds of difficulties for them.
Thank you.
Alderman Tellerman.
To Rita's other question about whether this would halt or delay it, my sense is that if we did not approve this, it would delay it. Rennie, is that, do you agree with that?
I think it has that potential, but I'm not a lawyer, and I can't speak to what effects that it might have. But my understanding is that it makes, well, I guess the answer would be yes. because from my understanding, it might mean more paperwork, might mean that a lender, for example, might require two different elements or two different approaches to the lending. So
Okay. It seems like, as Rennie alluded, that might be a question that we could answer on attorney-client session. So I would propose that we move forward with the agenda and then discuss this with, there are a few other items that we need to go into attorney-client session for. I was trying to move the meeting forward so that if people don't want to stay till the end, they have an opportunity to leave when we move into the attorney-client session. So I will move forward with the agenda and then we'll come back and take a vote on this if everybody in the committee is okay with that. Okay. So the next sorry, I have all my papers mixed up. The next item on the agenda was proposed legislation, proposed memorializing resolution on rent relief by Alderwoman Hirsch. So I will yield the floor to her now.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you to the members of the Laws and Rules Committee. There's currently a resolution that's been put out by Senate Housing Hearing Chair Brian Kavanaugh, and it's S814 in summary. This bill creates a new New York State emergency voucher program for tenants impacted by COVID-19. In order for tenants to be eligible for this emergency voucher, they have to demonstrate a substantial loss of income due to the current pandemic. The voucher would cover the amount above 30% of the current income of the impacted individuals. For clarity, if someone was unemployed, the voucher would cover up to 100% of their rent. The limit on this assistance would be 3 months in nature as the bill is currently written, and utility payments would also be included in the voucher coverage. I'm just looking to pass a memorializing resolution by our Common Council so that if this moves forward, residents in the city of Kingston would be able to access this voucher to help pay their rent for 3 months. It would send a good message.
Thank you. Anyone on the question? Alderman Scott Childress?
yes, I think there's no doubt that we're in a very difficult time and that the times, especially for those folks who have lost their jobs or who are in unstable housing situations, they're going to get more difficult. And I think that it's essential that the state push every possible remedy that it can. So I'm absolutely in favor of this memorializing resolution.
Alderwoman Worthington?
I just want to echo Alderman Scott Childress's words there. I'm definitely in favor of this. With the current situation that's going on, we know that it's going to get worse before it gets better. And although we already have a moratorium on rent, as soon as that up, there's going to be a lot of people facing some real hardships and difficulties. So I just want to go on record saying that I am in favor of this legislation.
President
Just pointing out Patrick's mute is
off.
So
yes, Alderman O'Reilly. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I just wanted to say thank you to Michelle for all the work and information that I've been receiving about how to help people in the community. I know that's your job, Michelle, and I don't know all the ins and outs, but thank you for keeping us updated as you go along.
Thank you, Patrick.
Okay, and I just want to say that I support this. I think as the son of immigrants, I know what it's like to to have parents working 3-4 different jobs and not knowing where your next rent payment is going to come from. I know it because I've lived it. And I know there are people in our community that need help right now. And while I see this memorializing resolution as a good step, I think we could and we should do more to help those who are struggling. Memorializing resolution is usually a nice gesture or something, a last resort when you feel like there's nothing else that can be done. But I think there is more that we can do, and I would encourage Alderman Scott Childress to convene with his Housing Subcommittee and brainstorm and come up with other possibilities of what we can do to help our people who are struggling and present something to this committee as soon as possible. Yes, Alderman Scott Childress.
Yes, I thoroughly agree with that, and I do think we definitely need to have a meeting as soon as possible. So tomorrow, I'll speak with the other members, and we'll see what's the first possible time we can establish one of those meetings. And I would like to add to what you were saying. We want to search every possible way that we can go about doing this, but we have to recognize that there are different levels of authority in New York State. And so, you know, I think too that we need to look for ways to work with everybody who's involved, because lots of people are going to be affected in all kinds of ways. Fortunately, we have recently gotten word of receiving over $400,000 through the federal HUD program, the CDBG grants. I think we may be in line for even more money. So we need to be ready as soon as we're clear on what those monies are and where we can use them. We need to be clear about where we can apply them. We can also be looking for ways to create a stronger sense of community. Alderwoman Hirsch had suggested calling older folks in our wards. I've been calling people of all ages, and it's a really important thing to do for us to keep in touch. So even though we can't walk the wards, anything that we can do to connect with people and talk with folks and find out how they are, I think both of these are really important, both the money side and the community building side. Thanks.
Thank you. Alderwoman Worthington.
Yes, I just want to make sure that if we're going to be referring this to the Housing Subcommittee, for that committee to then come up with other suggestions and research other topics that can help the community. I want to be.
Sorry to interrupt you. Just to clarify, we will be voting on the memorializing resolution. But what I was asking was for the Housing Subcommittee to come up with other things we could do.
Okay, so that it's separate from then what we're doing now. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else on the question? Okay, so I have a resolution to approve a memorializing resolution supporting emergency rental assistance legislation as per attached. Do I have a motion?
Motion. Second. I'll second it.
Okay, Alderman Scott Childress motion, Alderwoman Worthington second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Okay, it carries. Thank you so much, Michelle, for all your work. I know you put a lot of thought into this, and we all appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Okay, next item. Oh, I think now we have a few items that we need legal advice on. So I will, oh, Alderwoman Worthington. Yes.
I'm sorry, Jeffrey. Before we move on, are we also discussing under new business the affordable housing in Kingston resolution? That's in our packet.
We already did address that.
Did we?
Yeah, that was the one with the mayor.
I missed that one. Okay.
I shuffled all my paperwork, so it's sorry that it was confusing.
Okay. So then there was the eviction moratorium.
Yes. So we have that.
Okay.
We have 2 items on new business and 1 item of and 2 items of old business.
Yep.
That I think we need to consult with our corp counsel, and then we'll come back, reconvene, and then take a vote on those.
Gotcha.
President Schott, I will let you take over.
All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna enter into attorney-client session with corp counsel at this time. So I am going to mute everybody and ask so don't leave, council members don't leave here. You could just leave this meeting open. I'm going to mute everybody and you could turn your camera off. I sent a conference call number to call into with an access code. So if you could do that, I will also be pausing the recording. So we will be back into this meeting as soon as the attorney-client session is over. No votes will happen during attorney-client session. Thank you. We'll be back.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, we are restarting our Laws and Rules Committee. So should I just keep going with the agenda?
Yes.
Okay. So the next agenda item that we had on the table was the Kingstonian rezoning. Anything to add on the question? Alderman Scott Childress.
I'll just say that this is a procedural issue. I don't think there's anything of great concern in terms of making this property whole with the MUOD, so I'm in favor of it, and I'll be motioning for it.
Anyone else on the question? Okay, I will read the resolution I have. And excuse me for a copy of somebody's handwriting, so it's gonna take me a while. Ordinance amending the zoning map to extend the mixed-use overlay district to include 51 Schwenk Drive, tax map number 48.80-1-24-120. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Alderman Scott Childress, is there a second? Alderman Tallerman. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Motion.
The vote was 4-1. Opposition was Alderman Ventura Morel for the public.
Okay. Next agenda item is communication was sent by Alderman Tallerman about a proposal for a commercial vacancy tax. So I will yield the floor to Alderman Tallerman.
Thank you, Jeffrey. So this tax is really to encourage the growth and the vibrancy of our business districts, all three, uptown, midtown, and downtown. I think it's fair. People would agree that empty retail spaces are they take the wind out of the sails for the vibrancy, for the life, for the activity of any downtown, and any vacant space just drags the other spaces down with it. You know, that doesn't look good. It doesn't bring people to the city. It brings the other owners, it brings their property values down, and it's all around not good for any community to have empty retail space. And as a business owner and building owner myself, I'm I'm very well attuned to, to the notion that a landlord should be able to do what they want with a property, but not if it's going to hurt the community at large. And that in our city, certainly, but in most places, if the price is right, you will find a tenant. And if the price is reasonable, at market or a little below market, there are people who want to have retail space, be it, food stores, retail stores, but even art galleries, which won't pay maybe market rate, but will pay real money and will help liven up a neighborhood. So the vacancy tax is something that is happening in some cities around the country. It's being looked at more and more. Oakland, California recently adopted it. San Francisco is very close to adopting it. New York City is taking a good hard look at it. And there are a couple of other cities. There's not a lot of it in the country, but it is something that's being talked about and looked at. And, Kingston is it's been a long road coming back from 10 or 20 years ago in our recovery. And this will really help us turn the corner, I believe. And even during this pandemic, if we had just a lively open retail for visitors to come and enjoy our city, it'll just help lift the whole city. So I'm proposing enticing owners, to lower their price, to lease their empty retail spaces, to bring their prices down to a reasonable market rate, and show in earnest they are actually trying to lease the space. Demonstrate that they are marketing it, that they're listing it with brokers on real estate listing websites, and making a good faith effort to lease their space. And if they don't, if they really just do nothing to open their space up, to lease it, I'm proposing that we have this tax, so that at least they'll be paying back to the community in some way. And the proposal has a staggered fee schedule or tax schedule, and this is up for proposal. For conversation. I had proposed smaller spaces, a monthly fee of $200, 5,000 to 2,000 square feet. Medium spaces, 2,000 to 4,000 square feet, paying $600. And then a jump for spaces over 4,000 square feet. I think we should aim for a more reasonable jump to maybe $800, $850 for maybe even up to $1,000. I'd like to hear what you guys have to say, but it should certainly be something reasonable. We don't want to be targeting any specific type of building or type of investor. This is really for all three of our business districts. It's targeted at anyone who owns retail space in our central business districts. And by the way, this does not. This is only focused on our main business areas. So I'm not talking about side streets, a bodega or a little shop that might be on a side street. This is not targeted at them at all. The legislation specifically focuses on in Uptown, specific streets, Wall Street and part of North Front Street, Midtown only along Broadway, the Rondout only along Broadway. So that's what I propose, and open for thoughts and conversation.
Alderman Scott Childress.
Yes, I very much like this idea for several reasons. First off, it would parallel something similar that we have for residential structures. We have a fee for residential structures that are not inhabited. So it makes sense that we would have something similar for commercial establishments. Going along with some of the things that Don said, I'm holding up a book here called Walkable City by Jeff Speck. And as we consider ways to create a more pedestrian-friendly city, one in which we are really working to create, a healthy environment for all of us, one of the crucial things that Spec points out is there are numerous studies that demonstrate that you have to have vibrant spaces. You have to have vibrant storefronts. That's the sort of thing that draws people along. When you have empty storefronts, when you have long walls like on poorly designed parking garages, these are the things that diminish pedestrian traffic. So these are the sort of things that point to the possibility that this sort of a law is in fact very good for business. The last point that I would like to make preliminarily is that small businesses thrive on the presence of other small businesses. When you have one small business in the midst of 7 or 8 empty storefronts, it's unlikely that that place is going to draw a lot of customers. So there are clearly some other questions that we need to ask, but in general, I'm very much in favor of this sort of approach to dealing with our problem of empty storefronts.
Alderwoman Worthington.
Thank you. So clearly, I think that there needs to be a little bit more research on this. My concern is how this is going to affect those that may not be as economically fortunate as some others, especially comparing uptown businesses to midtown businesses, and what effect or impact this is going to have on those businesses. If their storefronts or their businesses are not operating right now, it may be because of financials as it is. So to then impose a tax on them, a further tax on them, that may create more of a hardship. So I'm not in favor of moving this along tonight. I think that we need to research it further, and I have some questions. My concerns, I believe, are valid. And so that's my position on this tax.
Yeah, I think we're just beginning the conversation now, and if I understood what Don was saying, he's just trying to get a feel for where the council stands on it. Because I do agree that it needs more research. There's more information that we need to find out in terms of the cities that are looking to implement it or how they've implemented it. In terms, for example, my question was what defines building as vacant? If it's empty because it's being renovated, would that be considered vacant under this? So I think there's a lot more homework that we should be doing about this. Anyone else on the question?
I'd like to speak, Jeffrey.
Yes, Patrick. Alderman O'Reilly.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I think Mr. Gartenstein would concur that we have to be very careful that we are targeting certain people here. Don said the word targeting about 4 or 5 times, and I know he was saying we're targeting certain areas, but we have to be very careful here who we're targeting. I think Rita's point is an excellent point, that just because you own a building and you're in financial stress doesn't mean your local government can come in and take that building away from you. And the way they would do that, they wouldn't do it with soldiers or policemen. They would do it with a tax. So, to take people's businesses from them because they're in a financial strait, a problem, because they're having financial problems, sounds very wrong to me. Thank you.
Anyone else on the question? Okay, so Alderman Tullerman, what do you think the next steps? What do you propose?
So I will pull together some research and redraft this with more specifics related to the to our business districts, exactly where and how much, and again, show data that backs up not only that this had a positive impact on communities and cities, but also data that other cities have produced and that are using for their similar tax.
Thank you. President Schott, did you raise your hand?
I was just gonna, Alderman Tollerman said he was gonna do it. I was just gonna ask for models from other municipalities to see. So you said it, so I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so
Jeffrey?
yes.
Patrick?
Okay, yes, Patrick O'Reilly.
I remember when Uptown was vital, right? It was like hopping. There was cars everywhere. People were shopping. My mother used to take me by the hand uptown, and we would go to the Mohegan Market and get our vegetables. Then we'd go to Schneller's and get our meat. It was a wonderful place, and 99% of the retail, and Schneider's jewelry was there, and it was just wonderful. And then the businesses went away, and the business fronts were empty. But I don't blame that on the people that own the businesses. I don't think they should be taxed because they're hanging on to this building for whatever reasons that they may have to hang on to a building. It was an economic downturn. So what do you do during an economic downturn when you don't punish people by taxing them for their having a business? You do something else. Maybe lower their taxes. Thank you.
Alderman Scott Childress.
I think those are good points that Pat raises, but those are precisely the sort of things to discuss, the sort of things to contemplate in a law such as this. I think it's clear that unwarranted real estate speculation leads to dire economic consequences for an entire community. And so clearly we wouldn't simply pass a law like this. We would think of it in conjunction with a number of the things we already do and other things we might do in the future. So for example, we have the small business loans that are available through the KLDC. These are the sort of things we could work with landlords, may not know that those exist, in gear with those. So I think there's a lot of possibilities here. But like I said, the problem with unwarranted real estate speculation is when buildings are sitting vacant for a long, long time, it has a deleterious effect on the community at large and on the local community. So I look forward to thinking about this and discussing it more.
Thank you. Anyone else before we move on? Okay, so I look forward to hearing more about this as you do more research. And this segues into Alderman Tollerman's other proposed legislation, mobile food truck.
Okay, great. So the food truck legislation, we really don't have one, and the main impetus behind this is just to have some uniform rules to ensure cleanliness and health department standards, and also our streetscape. We certainly want to have our streetscape as nice as we can, and we want to just be responsible and have some rules that we can all agree on about food trucks. We spend a lot of time and money trying to improve our streets. Schwank Drive, we're going to be trying to improve with the smart streets, and Broadway will be spending $30 million on our revisioning of Broadway. And so we want to just consider everything that's along our streets, our buildings, which we're going to be looking at with our zoning, and food trucks are part of that landscape. And we don't have anything currently on the books. I certainly don't want to penalize small businesses. Rita mentioned earlier, the notion of hurting small businesses. And this is not about having large fees or trying to raise new capital for the city. I don't think that there should be large fees for people who operate a food truck, and there should be a nominal fee, and just to make sure that they're registered and following the rules. So I look forward to hearing from everyone about what you feel should be included in this legislation. Many cities have such legislation, and so it's really, we just need to create something that works for us.
I agree with you. I think there is value to this. There is value to have places that serve food, for example, have to undergo a health inspection. I think that I was surprised to find out that it's not already the case in the city of Kingston. My only concern, as Rita was expressing, is that I don't want to make it prohibitive for people who might be struggling. The food truck culture is something that is fairly new in the country, and it's something that we should celebrate, the entrepreneurial spirit of people that maybe don't have the capital to open a restaurant but still want to do something. So I look forward to working with all of you on coming up with a fee that is reasonable for the license that still encourages people to run small businesses, but at the same time make it safe and healthy for all our residents. Anybody else on the question?
I think we agree with you, Jeffrey. Well, at least I do. I agree with Jeffrey in that we certainly don't want to penalize any small businesses who depend on, those food trucks for livelihood. And again, any legislation that we decide to develop that may or may not go forward, we need to be really careful that we don't end up targeting certain populations of the city. That is a concern that I have with any legislation that might be crafted, because while the intent may not be there, it certainly will impact those that are less fortunate, and especially small businesses. So that's my concern going forward. But I do think that there should be regulations with any place that serves food. There should be health regulations. So I am in favor of that. However, I am not all the way on board with taxing and or assessing fees, especially at this time.
President Schott, and then Alderman O'Reilly.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with Alderwoman Worthington's point with, when you craft legislation and move forward with it, you just have to be aware of the consequences, even if that's not your intention. Everything has consequences. So I'm just happy to see that, these are being pointed out and going to be carefully looked at. But a suggestion while doing more research on this, Don, perhaps when you're looking at some of the municipalities that have already crafted this legislation, consider the same median income that Kingston has, and look at municipalities that have our same median income. Instead of looking at a place, and I'm not accusing any of you of doing this because I don't know what the research you've done on this yet, but instead of looking at municipalities that may be the same size as us but have a higher income level, wouldn't be a fair assessment of what we should be doing. So just research, just suggesting that. That's it.
That's an excellent point. Alderman O'Reilly?
Jeffrey, you said that there's no health inspection of these vehicles countywide?
As far as I know, there is no regulation of food truck businesses right now.
So you can open a food truck, start cooking eggs in the morning and not have any permit or health permit? Dan?
Dan, can you confirm that?
Dan needs help.
Can you mute him?
I would think that the health department is a county health department. and they would cover this kind of thing already.
And he's having trouble unmuting himself.
Oh, we
He's-
waiting for Don?
No, I think Dan is texting us.
Okay.
That our corp counsel was trying to answer that question, but he was having problems unmuting himself.
He should be able to unmute himself now, Dan, if you're hearing
Which is very
us.
unusual for Dan.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, there are Board of Health regulations with regard to food trucks. There are also state regulations with regard to food trucks. We do not have local legislation at this point, and I believe that is what Don is speaking about. But they certainly do have to comply with health department regulations.
But do they have to be inspected regularly?
I don't have details with regard to the specific inspections they have to go through and what regulations they have to comply with, but there certainly are some.
Okay.
I mean, I can't give you a detail, but this is really, I mean, the legislation that Don has proposed is not really speaking as much about, health regulations and health reviews as much as siting and operation and more, zoning type issues than, than health review. That's accurate?
Correct.
Okay.
Anyone else on the question? Okay, so we are we okay moving on? And Don, you will do more research on this?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And if you need any research help, I'm always available. I'd be happy to contribute on this. So the last item on the agenda is Alderwoman Hirsch's proposal on eviction moratorium resolution. So I will yield the floor to her.
Hi, thank you, Jeffrey. So as everyone here knows, that I had put in a resolution calling for a moratorium on evictions in the city of Kingston, extending 30 days past June 20th. And in conjunction with the other piece where we give the city of Kingston residents 6 months to pay back their past due rent. So I unfortunately, because I've been sick, didn't get to do a lot of work on this. So there is still a little bit more that does need to be figured out on this. I was hoping to have had some people come to the meeting tonight to speak, but we weren't able to work that out. And so would like to find ways that we can get this moving. I think it's really important that we take care of the residents, our tenants in the city of Kingston. I think we need to also make sure that the legislation works with mortgages and mortgage holders, and just that make sure we're doing everything correctly. I think I also would like to look at, I hear New York City is looking to do a moratorium past the executive order. So I'd like to learn a little bit more about that. And also the fact that New York State did put rent moratoriums in place in multiple cities prior to the executive order. So I think there's just a little more legal things that we need to look into on this. And I think we're all in consensus that this is something that we want to try to make happen or move forward in the right way. So
yeah, this is definitely something I would like to see move forward. We're on the same page on that. I would propose to have the Housing Subcommittee do the research, so that you're not doing all the work yourself, to have some help to do the research. You have at the subcommittee level, you have no limitation of how often you could meet. You could meet every day for the next week. Or
the public's all home, right? What is the timeline like to announce the meeting notices for a subcommittee meeting? Is it 72 hours?
It's the same, yes.
Okay.
And
Yeah. So I'm thinking what we'll do is tomorrow morning I'll try to coordinate with the other members of the subcommittee, with the president of the council, with the clerk, and try to figure out what's the first available time where we can do this. We also want to make sure that some of the other folks who are really experts and deep into the issues related to housing can participate in one way or another.
Yes, and I look forward to hearing your findings and having something hopefully come back to this committee as soon, if we have to schedule a special Laws and Rules Committee to get this done, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, I would like to work as hard as we can on this as a subcommittee and get this back to a special Laws and Rules before next caucus if possible.
Right. Right. So thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Jeffrey. That was what I was going to mention. Since the subcommittees, they have in and of itself has no voting power. We just want to make sure that this legislation, moves forward expeditiously and comes back to Laws and Rules, and then possibly onto full council. As this is very important, and I think this should be a priority.
Thank you. I just feel like, we all are aware that we had a housing crisis here in Kingston prior to COVID-19. We weren't able to pass the ETPA, and things are only going to be much, much worse. And I think that as the council and representatives to the people of the city of Kingston, the tenants, that we owe this to them. So I know that there's a lot more work that also needs to be done to protect homeowners and mortgage holders, but if there are going to be evictions, I think that this is a good place for us to start. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So procedurally, President Schott, do we need a motion to forward this to the subcommittee, or?
I don't think we do, but I mean, we could, Dan, are you there? Give us procedure.
He walked into Don's house. Oh, there he's back from Don's house.
I figured it out now. See, the problem is that I don't have a touch screen, and I forgot that I'm not using my iPad. So I wasn't actually clicking on the microphone. I was trying to poke it with my finger, and it doesn't work. What's the question?
Procedurally, to refer this, excuse me, to refer this eviction moratorium to the special subcommittee, do we need a motion for that, or can they just take it on?
There's no procedural requirement one way or another. It's basically internal rules. You can do it either way, whatever Andrea says. I mean, obviously, making a motion, seconding it, and voting is certainly not very onerous.
Thank you, Dan.
Let's be more formal and let's take a motion.
Okay.
Motion.
Motion.
From Alderman Scott Childress, a second from Alderwoman Worthington. All in favor? Patrick?
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? Okay, so I look forward to continuing to work on this with you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you, Rennie. Thank you, Rita.
Excellent.
Don.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, President Schott. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our agenda. Anything to add before I call for a motion to oh God, the word is escaping.
Adjourn.
This is what happens when I get hungry.
That's why you want to stay.
So, anything else to add? Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
All right.
we are adjourned. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everyone.